have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
Hey guys, it's Eric Osa here, and I'm so happy to say that in this video we're joined by my good friend Caillum Hedderman. Caillum is an 18-year-old from County Limerick. He's an advocate for sustainable development and climate justice at a local, national and international level, while striving for the voices of young people to be at the forefront. I've known Caillum for a while, and I've worked with him on a few occasions. He's a very impressive young man, and is someone who I think will play an instrumental role in shaping our nation's future. In this video, we talk about what we think the flaws of the Leaving Cert are, the fact that it is outdated and does not take into account the mental health challenges that many students have to deal with. We talk about the amazing work Caillum has done recently to advocate for student voice, in the midst of a crisis surrounding the question of whether students should return to school or not, and the rise in popularity that he has had to deal with personally that followed. We talk about the traditional nature of the Leaving Cert and how we seem to, as a nation, be unwilling to let go of the exam in its current form because of this tradition. We also talk about what we would like to see our policymakers and politicians doing in this area too. I really hope you enjoy the video because I really enjoyed making it. Without further ado, here it is. Hey guys, it's Eric Osa here, and I am back with another video. And today in this video, I'm joined by someone who I'm so grateful to be able to call a very good friend of mine, and also a fantastic activist who does great work generally, but has been particularly busy over the past month because of the work that he's been doing around the subject of the Leaving Cert. So hello, Caillum, it's great to have you on.
Hello, Eric. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. It's my absolute pleasure having you on the channel. Okay, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to kind of give a brief rundown, a synopsis as to all the great work that you've been doing over the past month.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I suppose to start off, I'm Caillum Hedderman. I'm 18 years old. I'm from Ballybirkin in the beautiful County Limerick. And yeah, just I suppose overall, people ask me this a bit like, what is it you do? What is you're advocating for? And I suppose sustainable development as a whole is what I give it. So whether it's climate justice, whether it's social justice, whether it's youth rights, everything in between. I suppose it gives me a bit of flexibility in my work, so I can work around that and say sustainable development. But I suppose over the last month in particular, so I'm a Leaving Cert student myself, so I'm in 6th year in hospital in County Limerick. So it's been a weird year, a weird 2 years actually, kind of looking at the situation last year, hoping that it wouldn't repeat, and now we're kind of in a situation again where we don't have answers, we don't have clarity. So for the past month, I've been bringing a student perspective to debate, I suppose. So like we've seen that often young people's voices are tokenized, and people speak on behalf of them. So last year we saw that politicians and teachers were speaking on behalf of students because it was such a quick turnaround to make a decision, because there was a lot less time than we have now. But when the opportunity came around, my local newspaper, the Limerick Leader, have to give them a shout out as well. They asked me to write a piece on what the Leaving Cert is going to be, what students want. So I wrote a piece, didn't expect it to go very far, and then put it up on Instagram, and it blew up, I suppose. It got something like 25,000 likes, I think, which was crazy. So from there, just doing interviews through the radio, TV, writing more articles, jumping on things like this. I did a podcast last week, hoping to start up my own podcast in the coming weeks. And yeah, it's just been really interesting bringing the student voice out there and really putting all solutions on the table.
Awesome. That's incredible. That's fantastic. Caillum has been so busy over the past month, as he said there, doing such great work to advocate for student voice. So it wouldn't make sense in the midst of all the controversy at the moment, with kind of political questions being put forward as to whether students should go back to school or shouldn't go back to school, not to have you on talking about these topics. So this video is primarily concerned with the Leaving Cert in its entirety. I think, as someone who's done the Leaving Cert, and I'm sure you might be able to attest to this because you're doing it, it really is as an exam, and this applies to rhetoric coming from people who have done it and who are older as well. As an exam, it's quite stagnant. It's quite stuck in the mud. It was established in 1925. I believe that's when the first exam was sat near the beginning of the state. And since then, we haven't seen any significant changes to the format of the exam. So, Caillum, based on this premise, what do you think the major flaws are to the Leaving Cert?
Yes, so I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, we've had the same set of exams since 1925. That's 95, 96 years ago now. I think surely we've seen some developments in Irish society since then. I think definitely we can improve the way we examine people, and have the same set of exams is crazy when we look on nearly 100 years later. But I suppose this year in particular, what we've seen, the big flaw with the Leaving Cert exam itself, is that there's been so much time missed from classroom. So, like, I was in fifth year last year, looking on at the sixth years that are now gone on to college or took a break or whatever, that did their Leaving Cert last year, and just looking on, I suppose, a sense of it was surreal, hoping that it wouldn't be the same situation for us. And then we're in January now, nearly the end of January, and it's a very similar situation. So I think the big flaws there this year in particular is the amount of time missed. So it's nearly 4 months now out of the classroom, and all this talk about a traditional Leaving Cert. I think the last 2 years of our senior cycle has been anything but traditional. So that's probably the biggest flaw. But I think in general terms, you said it yourself, like it's somewhat of a memory game. It's quite stagnant. It's rote learning, and hopefully the essay that you study turns up on the day, and you can write that and get your specific marks, and you get all your spellings right and everything. And I think that's probably the biggest flaw, and the fundamental flaw is that we're not testing people on their capabilities. We're not testing people on their competencies, the skills they've acquired over their 16, 17, 18, 19 years of life, that it's all based on whether you can write a 4-page essay on the imagery you see in a poem.
Yeah.
Now, I love poetry, but I don't think that's probably the greatest way to do it. And as well as that, like the Leaving Cert itself, it doesn't account for what someone does outside of school. It doesn't account whether you're a sports star, whether you're an activist, whether you're doing community projects, whether you're helping your classmates. It doesn't take into account for any of that. You're pinned beside everyone in the country in this national standardization process with a bell curve that gives specific grades, and they have to hit a certain number. And so I think that's a big issue. And I suppose fundamentally is that we need to examine people in a way that they're comfortable with and they feel is representative. And right now, I don't think people feel that's very representative of their work.
Absolutely, it's a great way. You absolutely brilliantly articulated the fundamental critiques of the Leaving Cert that we tend to hear, and I think you touched on something that is quite important and pertinent and speaks to the culture of the Leaving Cert. The fact that there's almost a kind of arrogance which surrounds Leaving Cert culture, in the sense that it dehumanizes students to simply exam numbers, and their merits and their worthiness is based upon how they do well in an exam that does not assess who they are, does not take into account the personal challenges that they have to deal with in regards to mental health, what they do extracurricular beyond the curriculum, but instead looks at an exam which is stagnant, as you said, and that it assesses not what not how you appraise things, but instead, what you can remember. It's a memory test, as you said. And I think this is something that we need to change, especially when we look at different educational models throughout Europe. You think that after last year, we learned that we needed to change the model slightly, but instead, we're still, maybe because of culture and tradition, hooked on this kind of model of examination. Would you agree or disagree with what I said there?
I completely agree. Like, I suppose over the last month as well, I've been quite lucky to speak with some politicians, education spokespeople on education in particular, and the big issue around the Leaving Cert and why it's so trusted is because of public confidence.
Yeah.
So there has been studies done into it by even the United Nations, and although the Leaving Cert has come back as the number one ranked as the most stressful set of state exams that a young person could sit, it's come back as, I think it was ranked second highest in public trust in an exam process.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a balance that we have to reach there, but I think what's really important is that the learners are put first.
Yeah.
And so what I've been advocating for this year is that, like, students are given the option to be examined in the way they feel most comfortable and representative of their work that they've put in. So whether that be sitting in exam with alternate questions and a setup like we've seen at a junior cert level, where there's been changes where it's been like continuous assessment, and people have been allowed to do presentations on their extracurricular activities and things like that they're encompassing in that. But as well as that, I think people should be given the option, if they wish, to have predicted grading as well, because obviously we've done some testing over the last couple of months and with the last 2 years. But I think in particular, like when we touch on the standardization and how students are made to be another statistic of like we hear about Leaving Cert students and we hear 61,000. That's all you hear, 61,000 students. You don't hear, oh, there's Caillum from Limerick, there's who sat as Leaving Cert. Like you don't hear the personal anecdotes. And although statistics are really important, and they give us a good judge on everything, it's not good in a way you examine someone to go on as one of the most important exams of their life, as they call it, because it defines what you do in college, whether you get a placement offer, what you do is your career. And I think as a society, we could do a lot better in the way we examine people. And even when you think, when you like you spoke about the personalized side of it. So like when we look at mental health, that's no way accounted for in the exam process. People can be completely forgotten about, and you're just expected within these 3 weeks that are set at the start of June to sit an exam. And although it's been like that since 1925, I think definitely, as you said, the last year has showed us that we most certainly can change, given the circumstance. And I think it should be a matter of proactivity and not reactivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree and concur with everything you said there. And I think it shouldn't be culture or tradition which holds us back when it comes to making nuanced and progressive steps forward when it comes to the educational model of examination that we adopt here in Ireland. Okay, so next question. We know that in this country, the lawmakers, decision makers, those who create policies are those who kind of shape things, and they regulate the way we behave. They structure the different systems that are in place within our country, be they educational system or the public service, that as a system. Look, do you feel that policymakers or politicians are doing enough when it comes to the Leaving Cert, and when it comes to allowing the Leaving Cert to evolve past this state of stagnation that we both articulated into a kind of better state that is like the other ones in Europe, which are more progressive?
Like we've seen across the world that like education is probably one of the biggest issues in our society. Like top three, like housing, education, like they're always the two in the big manifesto when we hear politicians on their general election run and their local election run. And for me, like the big issue is like education should never be like a question of inequality. Like everyone should have access to education. It should never be a matter of inequality for people or disproportionate impact. And unfortunately, like in the last year or two, we have seen that, because it's whether people have Wi-Fi, whether people can access a device. But as well as that, I think like in terms of politicians, if they are doing enough or not, it's really important that those like vocal politicians aren't causing more confusion for students. Because obviously we're seeing the massive, like immense mental health struggles of students. Like one statistic is like the Leaving Cert class of last year were polled by RTE, and they looked at it and they looked into it as like the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the state exams, and kind of brought them all together into one report. And 46% of students who did this survey, who were polled, reported heightened level of anxiety and or depression because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the state exams. So mental health is such a major factor, and it's important that our public representatives aren't misleading people, because we live in an electoral system that strives and thrives on political capital. And unfortunately, some politicians are a lot better than others when it comes to how they get that political capital, whether it's through meaningful change or whether it's through jumping on issues that are hot topics at the moment, like the Leaving Cert. But definitely there's some great politicians, and like when we look at it, like even teachers from the past that are now politicians working in the sector. But I think what's really important is the differentiation between politicians and policymakers. So obviously we have our Dáil and we have our Shannon and we have our local authorities. but the policymakers are the educational stakeholders. So the likes of the advisory group that Minister Foley runs through our Department of Education, like those are the policymakers, and that's where the decisions need to be made. Although I'd love if we could make it through radio or through YouTube videos. Unfortunately, that's not where the change happens, or the actual concrete governmental action happens. Like, I think, talking about poetry earlier in the video, I think like Seamus Heaney once said, I won't get the quote exactly right now, but you can't change the world through words, but you can most certainly change people's understanding of the world. And it's really important that politicians are putting out positive messages and reinforce messages that show that the government are working on it, but as well that the policymakers are doing the work behind the scenes, while also sharing in a, obviously with a capacity to not cause more confusion. But like the likes of politics that's divisive. So we've seen like a lot of hashtag cancel the Leaving Cert. And I don't think that's a pragmatic approach, because obviously if we cancel the Leaving Cert, we have to resit sixth year once again next year, which I can guarantee, I know me personally, that wouldn't be my ideal situation. I know a lot of people who I've spoken to, it wouldn't be the ideal situation. So it's important that, like, we're not only pragmatic, so that we're solution based in all our discussions, but as well as that we're empathetic, so we're understanding. Like, it's been such a difficult situation for students, and not only students but teachers, school communities, and their families. Like, I've listened to the radio and I've read articles and looked on Twitter, and I've seen like families speaking about like, oh, I stayed up till 4 o'clock last night with my daughter because she couldn't sleep because she's so worried about the state exams. So it's really important, in a roundabout way, I hope I've answered the question, that politicians are being constructive in it. Like we've seen over the last week in particular, like politicians come out and completely slate the government, which in different aspects is needed from opposition, but it's important that we're bringing solutions. And I think as a student body, especially with our representative body, along with the voices that have come through the media, we've been constructive, and we've put all options on the table. So fingers crossed. I know the politicians are listening, and hopefully the policymakers are listening too.
That's amazing. And I think that's such a great basis to conclude. You put that fantastically. And I think just as another compliment to you, during times of great emotion, it's so easy to succumb to that emotion and allow that to lead your actions. It's so easy to call for claims and changes that are not feasible, as you kind of touched on in your last statement. But it's hard to be constructive. It's hard to think deeply. It's hard to think about what is sustainable. And true leaders, those who possess leadership qualities, are able to, in the heat of sweltering emotion, sit down, think about the predicament, and think about how they can go forward in a reasonable way. And I think these leadership qualities have been exerted by you greatly during these times. So I'd like to commend you generally, but also personally, for the fantastic work that you're doing for students. And I'm sure it's going to lead to, hopefully, some reasonable changes in the future when it comes to the Leaving Cert, because we need voices like yours who pioneer the conversation on the Leaving Cert to hopefully bring it forward, so that soon the model that we choose to uphold here is one that's not only good in terms of appeasing those who are publicly confident about the system, but also appeasing, as you said, those who take the exams. We need that balance, as you referred to earlier. So thanks so much for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you very much. Like it's incredible. Like even like I could say the exact same about you. Like obviously we've been friends for a while now. We've worked on a few different things, but even like holding this conversation and inviting me into your channel to talk about it is exerting the exact same qualities. Like we need to lead these conversations, and like I completely agree. Like we're in a culture, especially as young people and activists, where often it's a lot of reactivity. But I think it's so important now that like emotions are quite high around everything to do with education and Leaving Cert, but as well as that, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, like everyone's affected in different ways. And like unfortunately, over the past few weeks, we've seen a lot of personalized hate. We've seen a lot of abuse directed. Like I've even got a bit of it, which I wasn't expecting. Well, I was expecting in senses, because that happens whenever you put yourself out there. But it's important that, especially us as young people, don't drop to that level, because we can hold respectful views. We can bring forward solutions while not having to criticize someone on the way they look or how they dress or the way they speak, because there's no need to do that. There's no need to drop to that level, because we're educated people. We're about to sit our Leaving Cert. We can't do that. And it's just so important that everyone gets their voice out there, because if we truly want to be representative, we really do need to lead these conversations and hold these conversations, no matter how hard or difficult they may be. But yeah, no, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to following all the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Caillum. It's my pleasure. I'm sure everyone watching this video has learned a ton from everything you said. So thank you once more. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sure you did. Caillum contributed brilliantly. And if you did, please like the video. If you have any opinions you'd like to share, let us know in the comment section. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. All the links to Caillum's social media pages will be in my bio. So make sure to check him out and make sure to check out all the fantastic work that he gets up to. Okay, bye.